Welcome back to the Technician to CEO podcast. Today, I'm joined with Joe Everest of Ozark Fence and Supply Co. You might know him from YouTube. The guy is an expert on video marketing, and maybe we'll touch on that today. But I really would like to dive a little bit into, Joe has a lot of experience of what it means to take over, run, and grow a family business. And I come from that background as well. And I'm sure some of you listening to this will think, I come from that background. And it comes with its own nuances. It may not be starting a business from scratch, but definitely picking up where someone left off, fitting into that or changing that culture and evolving it to grow it comes with its own challenges. So we'll dive into some of these topics today. But first, Joe, man, thanks for hopping on and chatting, man.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on it. It's nice to talk with fellow-minded folks.
Yeah, we met. I met Joe at the Expert Stain and Seal event, and speaking on. I believe you spoke on video marketing.
Yeah.
There, and Caleb, who we actually just recorded with recently here, so his episode will be up. Well, when this airs, it will already exist. So go find Caleb Roth's episode. But Caleb says you are a superstar, and definitely a guy like moving and shaking things in the fence business. So,
here's the thing: is I'm operating off the premise that you can go find someone that you really think has it all figured out. Like these guys just really have it together, and you go kind of pull them aside. You're like, man, and tell them that you've got it really figured out. And I really feel like they're like, man, I don't have anything figured out. This thing's held together by bubble gum and duct tape, and it looks like I've got it figured out, but I've got so much more to figure out. I really feel like that's where I'm at. Whether we're talking about social media with the YouTube channel, or we're talking about the physical business, Ozark Fence and Supply. We are so far from having anything figured out, and we figured some things out along the way, but we're certainly not there yet.
Well, it was funny yesterday when I was interviewing Caleb. In the middle of the podcast, he says, "I feel like I'm being interrogated with these questions you're asking me."
That's great.
But yeah. I think we're always in that process of figuring it out. If you are growing and things are changing, you're always out of your comfort zone, and to some extent, right? So if you had it all figured out, you'd be in a pretty stagnated position in business. And if you don't like figuring things out, maybe you shouldn't be in business. And that's just, my 2 cents. But we're not here to hear my 2 cents. I actually want to hear more about your story. So you're a third-generation owner of your family business, of Ozark. How did that business kind of give me like the real brief kind of background on it, and then how you got involved with the company?
I'll start back in the beginning. So my granddad and his brother-in-law started Ozark Fence back in 1955 because my granddad's brother-in-law had a steel foundry. And so they could make kind of their own fittings to a certain extent, that sort of thing. So they started building fence. They went into business together. A few years later, my granddad brought out his brother-in-law. His brother-in-law wanted to stick with foundry. My granddad enjoyed the fencing side, so they agreed just to kind of split ways. And they still worked together for years and years. And then in the mid-1990s, so my dad grew up in the family business. As a young kid, so he had a few brothers, and they all kind of got wrangled into this thing because anyone in the fence industry knows that the sons are the first workforce, or they're the cheapest workforce for sure, because they can come in and sweep and pick up trash and things like that. Well, so then my dad went through college. He got on with a company called United Cerebral Palsy, which is a not-for-profit that handles individuals and families affected by cerebral palsy. And he worked his way up to become executive director of the East Coast operations in North Carolina, which is actually where I was born, was just outside Raleigh. It got to a point where he had kind of climbed the corporate ladder. It was time for him to go up to the next rung, which would have either been in legislative in Washington, D.C., or corporate back in Dallas. And I was 12, so my siblings would have been 9 and 6. So for a young family, neither one of those seemed like really appealing options. So my mom and dad were trying to figure out what the next move was. Well, we came back to Missouri, which is where all my family on both sides is from. We came back to Missouri for Christmas, and my granddad kind of sat everyone down at the table and said, guys, listen. He goes, I'm done with the fence business. I'm going to sell it. I'd like to sell it to one of you, but I will be selling it to someone. And that night at the hotel, my mom and dad were really excited about it. I said, this is the correct timing. This is the right sign. So we sold everything we had in North Carolina, put a bunch of stuff in a U-Haul truck, and drove across the country back to Missouri. My dad bought it, so that was the mid-'90s. And then I got wrangled straight into it.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, young kids are good at picking up trash and organizing fittings and putting bolts in hinges, that sort of thing. And then I just grew up through the business. So this was prior to us having a welder, so we cut and fabricated all the gates using gate corners, that sort of thing. So I did that, and really just came up through the process. I went from there to an install crew. So from fabrication, went on an install crew. We did set and stretch separately at the time. Then on to a stretch crew, and I gave college the honest try. I really did, but during that time, my dad moved me into the office, into sales, and a little bit into operations. It became apparent to both of us that college was not the correct path for me. And so then I came into the business full time, sales, and then ultimately kind of running the residential operation. And then I bought the business from my dad in January of 2016. So since then, we've done a tremendous amount of growth. We've kind of grown several different divisions of the company. We were around 1.2 at the time in total top line revenue. This year we're on pace for around 4. So we've done a bit of growing since then. That's the kind of short and long of my story.
No, that's awesome. What was it like? Now, I grew up around a family business as well. What was it like for you growing up? So from that time when your dad was in the corporate world, so didn't have anything to do with what he did.
Yeah.
But then once you were kind of old enough to do some stuff, your dad was running the fencing business. What was that like growing up around a family business?
I did not appreciate it then nearly as much as I do now. Because it's weekends and it's after school, coming back to the office and just helping out around. It's summers spent at the fence company rather than, with my friends. My friends through high school were going off and, they're going to Padre and they're going to Daytona and they're going to all these places. And I was here doing fence stuff, and so I'd get to hear about all the stories when they came home and all that. So I definitely didn't appreciate it then. But I obviously do now. I mean, it gave me the foundational knowledge to be where we are today. It was hard work. There's no way around it. And, so nepotism is a real concern in a family business. And I really feel, and I'm sure you can relate with this, as sons in the business, we actually fight kind of reverse nepotism because our dads are trying so hard to prove to everyone else that they're not giving us an advantage. But then from those that we work with out in the field, they view that we are getting an advantage, so they're treating us differently. And it's really you're really getting the short side of both sticks. You know what I mean? Is you're fighting it from both ends. So you really kind of have it. It really makes for a harder time coming up, just because both sides, your dad and then the guys and gals that you work with are both just set on making sure that you don't get any unfair advantage.
Right.
But yeah,
it's really funny that you say that, on the job site, I never got an inch from my father. Like, he never gave me an inch. And then the subs and anyone working resented any level of instruction that came from my mouth. And I was young. And
Sure.
I hated it. I mean, it was like I resented that so much. Like, why can't you let me be the superintendent out here? And it was because they were looking at me. I was a child,
Sure.
and I'm coming out there telling them to do something, and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna call your dad," And
Yeah.
I remember it was one thing when I used to pick up trash. It was you're just a contractor's son. But when that transitioned and I started having a role in running a job site. And I was in way over my head. I got thrown right. I literally felt like I went from doing like grunt work to like run this job site. It was like a multi-million-dollar office complex. that we were building, and Dad was like, build this. And I mean, it was like right in the deep end of the pool, and I'm drowning because I don't have a clue how to
Sure.
make it happen, and I ain't getting any help from anybody. But I think what's also interesting about that is that at the time, I felt exactly what you said, but then looking back on it, I realized I had every advantage in the world.
Sure. Sure.
You know, I was given every advantage in the world, and I didn't deserve any of the opportunity that I was being given, and I didn't really appreciate it at the time. I
Yeah.
didn't really appreciate the opportunity, and looking back, it was like, man, I had an opportunity handed to me like on a silver platter,
Sure.
and I was complaining about the details of it, or like Dad being worried that things were going to be right, or people not respecting me at 21 years old. Of course, they didn't respect me. I was 21 years old. I was a
Right.
jerk.
Right.
And it is really interesting that whole phenomenon. But it's such a blessing to have a dad who wants to bring you into a family business, and I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah, I do now. Yeah, looking back on it now, I mean, I'm better for it for sure. And you've got a fair point that I was given the opportunity at all. So I mean, from that standpoint, I did have an unfair advantage because at the time, no one came into the office. There was no career path at Ozark Fence that led you from the field into the office. You could advance in the field,
Yeah,
but the fact that I got brought into the office to then work in sales and operations was probably an unfair advantage, just because that wasn't open to anybody else.
yeah,
And what I see now looking back is he was working me up to the point where I could take this over.
right.
I had the practical field experience. I had the fabrication experience in the shop. I've worked. I would say every role here. I'm trying to rack my brain thinking about if there's a role I haven't done, but I have. And so now I'm not asking anyone to do anything that I couldn't do or I haven't done in the past. I'm simply asking them to do, just what I have done. I appreciate it now much more than I did then.
Exactly. So you've been super successful. So you said 2016 to now, so that's 6 years. You've more than tripled the business in size. What had to take place, or what were you facing when you came in that you had to kind of change and grow or mold or retool to get there? Like, tell me about
Yeah.
what did it take to do that, to have that kind of next step in success?
It was finding the right people. It was
Okay.
absolutely finding the right people, both internally and externally to the company. And what I mean is, at the time, and understand that we also, our workforce has evolved since then, right? So since my dad was from the mentality from the mid '90s of just work, work, work. Like these are workers, and that's what they're here to do. And one thing we've kind of done is evolve that thought into like we're all in the team here. Like this isn't us and them, like this is we, right? So there was that mentality shift, and that made us make different decisions on who we had here as part of the team. So the buzzword right now throughout all the industries is culture, right? Everyone wants to
Yeah.
talk about culture and to
Yeah.
get good culture and get the bad culture out, but that starts with the people, right? So we had to make some hard decisions on this person was great at what they did, but as far as maybe attitude or as far as maybe just personality, they weren't a good fit with the team. And I think we all know the type of people we're talking about, the grumpy guys that just
Yeah.
no one wants to work with them. They're just they're always butting heads with the office, that sort of thing, but they get the job done. So you ignore them. It's like working with dynamite. You don't touch it too soft.
Yeah.
You don't jostle it. You just work with cotton gloves, that sort of thing. Um, we really we had to take a long, hard look at is that who still made sense to be a part of the business, and ultimately it didn't. Which is a scary thought, though. I mean, you're getting rid of a really good producer. I mean, they built a lot of good fence,
Yeah.
but people did not enjoy working with him, to include us, right? And so we were very much the company that when you woke up Monday morning, you kind of had to drag your pants on and you shuffled your feet all the way to the truck because you knew it was going to be a fight when you got to the office. So we kind of had a mentality shift around that. Now, when we're hiring, we'll spend all of about 5 minutes talking about work history and relevant experience. And we'll spend 25, 35, 45 minutes talking about who are you? Like, what are your 5-year plans, 10-year plans? What do you enjoy to do outside of work? Tell me about your family. What does your family like to do? That sort of thing to figure out personality wise, would you be a good fit on the team? And
Right.
we can figure out the rest. Like, there's nothing here that we can't train. And I really believe, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's some jobs out there that you have just innate talent, but most of what we do can be taught, no matter what we're doing, whether it's fence or plumbing or electrical or roofing or whatever. It's a teachable trade. It really is. We have to hire for personality. So that was the first thing. And we continue that to this day. And when we're doing interviews, we're to the point now where we're fully stocked as far as team members go. So we're still taking interviews. I've got an interview this afternoon, but now it's very much, are you going to be an incredible asset to the team? Can our team be an asset to you? Like, can this be a win-win for both of us? And if so, let's figure out where we can put you. We're probably a little top heavy at the moment as far as team members to production, but we're growing though. So that was a big thing for us, is getting our team members right internally, but also externally. It was getting our, so we'll call it like our board of advisors, right?
Okay.
Our professional circle that we surround ourselves with, which is the lawyers, the bankers, the accountants, the professional trades we need to surround ourselves with to set ourselves up for success. The worst time to go find a banker and start a relationship is when you need money.
That's
Worst
right.
time. The best time is when you don't need it. You find either through a recommendation. Actually, so our banker that we use now and we've used for quite a while, was a guy I went to high school with. So now he's executive vice president of this bank on lending, and he introduced me to some more people in his bank. But it was really just like, hey, let's go grab lunch and catch up. Haven't seen you since
Yeah.
school. Like, let's just start that. And then telling him about what my plans were. Like, here's where I want to grow. And actually, the conversation started out about, I also have some rental properties around town, and it started out with, he wanted to help me buy more houses, which, fantastic, I'm in. But I said, hey, while we're here, let me talk to you about Ozark Fence, about some plans I've got coming up in the next few years where we're probably going to need a lending partner to try to reach these milestones faster. And how would it make sense for us to work together? What do you need from me now to start laying the groundwork, so when I do pick up the phone and say I need some money, that you say, okay, green light? What do we need to do today to set us up for that success, 10 years from now, 5 years from now? And he was like, Joe, he said, no one ever asked me that. Everyone always calls me when they need money. Like, they've got a big purchase they need to do, or they've got, something coming up. He said, starting today, he said, I'll set you up for success. I'll show you what I need to see as far as profit and loss and balance sheets. And he really schooled me on how to read. I had understood profit, loss, and balance sheets, but how you read them and how do they make sense together, and what story do they tell, right?
Yeah.
And so asset to debt ratios, we talked about that, buying versus leasing equipment. So he was an integral part of our growth, because then, so at the time we were in a 1,200 square foot facility that was office and shop. Is probably 400 square foot office, the remainder in a shop. It's pretty tight quarters.
Yeah.
Well, then the facility next to us came up for sale, and actually never really went for sale. Is a guy my granddad had known while my granddad was alive, and we had talked about, hey, if you ever want to sell this place, could I get first dibs on it? I don't know if I'll be in the position to buy it, but at least I'd like a crack at it. Well, then he came over about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago now, and said, hey, we're expanding. I bought a new place in town, a bigger place, so we're moving. I'd like to sell this place. I'll sell it to you first if you'd like. Well, now, because I'd had this multi-year relationship with the banker, I could call him and say, hey, could you walk this place with me? Can we look at the numbers and just see if it makes sense? Lo and behold, we had the numbers to support it, because we had been working together, and he had said, hey, you need to work on, really it was debt to income ratio. you need to get some of this debt off your books. So maybe you lease equipment rather than buy it, so it doesn't show up as debt, that sort of thing. Um, and we went from about 1,200 square foot to now we're in about 15,000 square feet, and we're out of space. Like we've grown now to where we just had to go lease another 6,000 square foot here in town for a different business that we're starting up. But it's getting your team right. It really is, and having a lawyer, and it's probably the same story with the banker. The worst time to go find a lawyer is when you need one.
Yeah.
Because I can, the lawyer and I are now good friends where I can call him and say, hey, here's what I'm trying to do. Is this the best way to get this done? Or, whatever the scenario is. And it's just having a really good team. It is. And making sure that team knows each other. The banker knows, the lawyer knows, the accountant, because there's a lot of times where those three people need to work together. We're starting a new business. So I need each one of those three to work together and say, hey, guys, here's my goal. Here's what I'd like to see happen. How can we make this happen together? Well, I need this from this guy. I need that from that guy. Perfect. Let me get you all in the same email chain, and you can just, I'll give my permission to all of you to speak with each other, and you guys just pass whatever paper you need to pass to get this thing done. Whereas if I didn't know them, we'd be starting from scratch.
There is so much wisdom in what you just shared. Man, it is so interesting how I hear these common threads woven through what it takes. And I really love how you talk about how you built a relationship with a banker to gain the financial knowledge and the foresight to grow your business. And it reminds me I remember when Dad started giving me Kiyosaki books when I was younger. And he said, build your team of advisors, build your team of advisors. And because those people, you're never going to, you need a lawyer, you need an insurance guy, you need a banker, you need these people. And they can either be like vendors to you, or they can be a team of advisors that work around. And that's really cool because, that's the big thing. Everybody talks about, you got to be able to read a P&L, you got to be able to read a Your banker helped you understand what was important on that P&L to be successful down the road. And that's amazing. I do want to step back in the conversation just a second, though, because I thought it was really interesting how you said building a team internally started with a mindset shift.
Absolutely.
And you changed your mindset. You made some changes inside. And then you went and looked for people that were in alignment with that mindset. And it had to happen in that order, right? So
yeah, I think you're right. I think it absolutely had to happen in that order. Yeah, you're right.
So I think, one, that's a formula. So if you're hearing this, that's a formula. So my question is, if I'm listening to this and I'm like, you know what, I realize my business has got some of those cranky guys in it, and I want to change things.
Sure.
And I want to kind of change my mindset around that. Is there kind of a piece of advice, like where would I start? Where would I start in kind of reshaping how I think about my team? Is there kind of like that beginning point?
Yeah. So one thing I wish I had done is I wish I'd had a conversation with them first. So I really didn't handle it the best I could have, because it was really, I sat down and when I made the decision that we were going to change, we just started letting people go. It's like, so-and-so, appreciate your time here. You've really done a lot for the business, but we're changing the direction we're going. And unfortunately, that shift doesn't include you being on the team. We got to let you go effective immediately. And that was it. Of course, there was a little bit of conversation involved in that. They did not agree with that outlook. But what I should have done is I should have given them the opportunity to at least discuss what that looked like, And listen, that conversation could have gone something like, "Hey, this is my perception, and this is what I hear from the team, that you're kind of hard to get along with, that you've got a short fuse, that if it's not your way, it's wrong," that sort of thing. And that's really not where we're headed. Where we're headed is a team of inclusiveness, that everyone's voice holds equal weight, that we're all looking forward to working together. I would like you to stay on the team moving forward because, as you well know, you're an integral part of this team. But we've got to start making some changes. I'd like for you to be involved in those changes, but also we're going to make them regardless. So
Yeah.
while I'd like for you to be on the team, we're all, we're moving forward with or without you. Now, and we could have had that conversation, and it could have had the same result. You know what I mean? Some of these guys, I really feel like they were pretty set in their ways, but I don't know because I never gave them the opportunity. I kind of made the decision. We're shifting. This is what we're doing. Period. Like that, and honestly, that's one of my faults is that once I get to a point of making a decision, it's made. Like we're done. Like that's now
Yeah.
an assumption, and we're moving forward. There's
Yeah.
really no room for debate in that. So I don't know. I would have a conversation with them first. That hey,
Yeah.
this is where we're headed, and this is why. One thing we're
Yeah.
working on here now a lot is understanding the why behind the decisions. Just to have greater understanding of where we're headed. So I should have done that. And so for those listening that are in that situation, I would encourage you to have that conversation first. To let them know where you're going and why you're going there. We're leaning into inclusiveness so that we can create a work environment that we each want to come to work at.
Yeah.
That's what I tell my team is like, listen, I'm creating a job site here and a workplace environment that I want to come to work at. I've always worked in the fence company, but I've had a second job elsewhere during the '08 and '09 kind of slowdown there. And I've seen what it's like with corporate thinking that isn't inclusive, right? The dreading to come to work, the dreading working with this. So you see that you're on the schedule with so and you just know it's going to be 8 hours of butting heads and that sort of thing. I didn't enjoy it, and ultimately ended up leaving because I didn't enjoy the environment. The work was fine. I could handle the work. I was good at what I did, but I left because it was an environment that I didn't enjoy being in. And the first opportunity that I didn't have to be there anymore, I was gone. No notice, probably not proud of that, but I just left, and so that's
Yeah.
what I tell the teams, like we are creating an environment that we want to work at, period. That is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we happen to be more efficient now because our guys enjoy doing what they do, right? Because we're growing, we have multiple different areas of growth here, right? We've got some pre-staining, we've got fabrication, we've got retail wholesale material pulling and delivery. We're creating a different business that's in manufacturing. And so now I let all my team members work in each one of these jobs and they say, which one do you want? Which one do you enjoy doing? And if it's none of them, does it make sense? If you'd like to work here, then, where do you want to work sort of
Yeah.
thing.
I
And
like
now
that.
we're more efficient than we've ever been.
I like that. It's not just feel good stuff. When people are happy, they actually get more work done.
Yes.
I mean, there is a big ROI
Yeah.
that comes from that, and I'm glad you
And
mentioned it. As you were kind of making those changes, did you already have the right structure in place in your team, or did you also kind of have to renovate that structure to be able to support the growth?
great question. So no, we really didn't. I feel like we built it as we went. I really feel like, and we're continuing to build it. Like I don't feel like I said I don't feel like we're anywhere close to figuring that out. But we're creating the team structure as we go, based on strengths and weaknesses.
Okay.
And I think that's important because to focus on strengths, but also to have an honest conversation on weaknesses. And if you're building a safe environment, people feel safe having a conversation with you, then you can have that conversation too to say, so Friday I had individual team meetings with all my building and grounds guys and with their team lead. And we all talked about it. What are your strengths? What do you love to do? And how can we try to get you in a position that most efficiently uses those strengths? But also, what are your weaknesses? Like, you better than we know you. So we
Yeah.
can talk about what we perceive as your weaknesses, but what do you see as your weaknesses, and who can we pair you with that will kind of cover your back, so to speak, that will compensate for those weaknesses, and can we find someone that has weaknesses that your strengths protect their weaknesses? Like we're very much on just covering each other's back here, and in like the proverbial sense, I guess. But can we each take care of each other's weaknesses, sort of thing? I think it's really important to know that. But no, to your question of structure, we're really figuring it out as we go, and we're building it out currently because building and grounds used to be just a fabrication shop, the weld shop, and he used to be one guy, and then we hired him a helper, and then now he's a team lead over 6 guys. I have a feeling the interview this afternoon is going to go well, so he'll be over 7 guys this afternoon. And so now he's building out team leaders. Because he and I had that talk. He's like, listen, I can help manage all these people, but I think we need to create another layer here. I think we need to have them police themselves a little bit. So now that was part of the conversation Friday was, does it make sense for you to be a team lead? Do you want to be a team lead? I think one of the points of failure that we see a lot is people get forced into leadership roles that they don't want and they're not prepared for. But sometimes they feel obligated because there's usually money that comes along with that.
Yeah.
So they say, yeah, I do want the raise. Yeah, I mean, I could lead people. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
Maybe they can't. Maybe they don't want to.
So let me ask you, Joe, do you find leaders or do you develop leaders in your business?
I think it's both. I think we find people with leadership characteristics during the interview process, and then we try to help build, foster, and grow that. But I tell you what, we've got 2 guys during these interviews that expressed their disinterest in becoming leaders. They said we don't really want to be team leaders. I want to be the best support role I can be, but I don't want to be a leadership role. And that's okay. That answer has to be okay. They have to feel safe saying that answer. And here's the thing too, is leadership can't be tied financially. Can't be tied to a financial gain, I don't think. So these guys know that they have just as much opportunity to earn in a support role as they do in a leadership role. So they feel totally comfortable on not trying to force themselves into a leadership position and ultimately performing it not well. So they feel totally safe saying, hey, I can be a great support role. And they both are. We're fortunate in the fact that we've really fostered an environment here where all of our team members are rock stars. And I don't say that to brag. I just say that to explain that's the situation that we're in, is that even our support guys, I mean, these are guys that could be rock stars anywhere else. But I think we find it in interviews, but even sometimes we mess that up. So these 2 guys, I mean, if you get hired on here, we recognize some sort of leadership quality in you. But these guys, as of right now, aren't comfortable in the leadership role, and that's fine. So we won't continue to try to force that issue and develop that. But I think it has to be both, though.
I am really interested, and one of the things that I hear come up in these conversations is the reality that having a $1 million business is a really uncomfortable place for a service business from a profitability standpoint, from what it requires. Somewhere in that vicinity, you're kind of maxing out the person that's running it, and all of a sudden it takes more to do it, which squeezes any profitability out of it. And there's a growth beyond that that you kind of have to get back to that good place.
Yeah, I would agree with that. When we were at 1.2, which granted I had just bought the business, but for that first couple years, so say up until 2 or 2.5 million maybe, my stress level was at an all-time high. I was working more hours than I'd ever worked. I was probably working, usually I'd get here about 6. So because the first crew gets here at 6:30, so I'd have everything opened up, ready to go for them. And then I was here until the last crew left at about 5 or 5:30, Monday through Friday. And then usually I'd come in Saturdays because it's kind of quiet to get paperwork and stuff done. I was absolutely just burning myself to the ground trying to get this thing, trying to keep it going.
Uh-huh.
But you're right. I mean, who made this analogy? Matt Warner maybe made this analogy that it's like driving a car, right? So in first gear, you can only go so fast and so far in first gear. You're going to redline the engine, and you can only redline that engine for so long before you have catastrophic failure. So you shift into second gear.
Yeah.
And then that gets you a little bit further, a little bit faster, but then you got to shift again. I really feel like there's those levels in business that once you get to it, you are redlining yourself, you're redlining your team, and you got to shift. Now, unfortunately, in a car, that's pretty straightforward. Fresh. Well, and here's the thing: is I might show my age because there's going to be some people out there like, "What's a clutch? You gotta no, the car shifts itself." Like, well,
what are you talking about?
Yeah, they didn't used to. But in a car, that's pretty straightforward, though, right? Like, there's an obvious process to how you do that. In business, there is no obvious process to how to do that, and it's pretty scary because in how we did it and how we're continuing to do it, we hire ahead of the shift, right? We'll hire first and then find revenue to support that role. That's going to be the chicken and the egg conversation, right? Like, do you hire someone and then find revenue to support? Or do you try to earn additional revenue to support the additional role?
Yeah.
We hire and then find revenue to support them because, and again, that's probably part of it. We're not asking them to fit themselves into a role. We're going to hire them and ask them what they are great at, and we'll have an idea who we're hiring or what position we're hiring for, but then we'll kind of let them create that position that suits their strengths and weaknesses. But it's scary. We've got a pretty decent payroll account established that gives us some leeway. When we hire somebody, we can afford to have them on for 4 to 6 months with them not being ROI positive, them not producing revenue. It wasn't that way all the time. I mean, there were weeks where I didn't, and my accountant did not like this at all, but there were weeks that I didn't take home a paycheck. I would print it off, but then I would just stick it in my desk because I knew I was like, it's gonna make things kind of tight, And he did not enjoy that because he is in our QuickBooks and he is like, man, he said you have like 4 or 5 uncleared checks. He's like, what's going on? I'm like, well, I do need to take those in. He's like, what do you mean? Where are they? Well, they're in my drawer in my desk. He's like, no, you don't do that. And this is anyway, this is one of the many learning lessons. But we did that so that we could afford to hire people for that future growth, and then we're. At some point once you grow, you get to a point where you start having these accounts set aside for growth, for continued growth.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the secret of some of these companies is squirreling enough away to try things and to test things and give themselves runway to where it doesn't have to be ROI positive on day one.
A lot of wisdom, man. A lot of wisdom. We call those resistance points in business, and and obviously there's nuances in business,
of course.
But when it comes to service type businesses, I mean, 80% of it, fits across the board.
Yeah.
And those resistance points, you can't anticipate them. It sounds like that's kind of what you guys do. Is you're kind of anticipating, look, we're kind of coming up against that next point, and you guys are preparing for it because either you prepare for it or, using the car analogy, you slam into the rev limiter.
Yeah.
Right? Either you kind of prepare and you say, I know this is coming, I know it's going to be a challenge, but we're going to start trying to get ready because we see it coming. But the tendency is just to slam into the rev limiter and eventually, like you said, that's going to have catastrophic.
Yeah, I mean, it's
how
easy.
Long you do it.
It's easy to look at this and say, I can't afford that. I can't afford to hire somebody else. How can I afford to do that? And I get it. Like, we have been there where you look at the cost of hiring someone on, and you think there is no way, at least in my mind, because my mind goes to what are we going to pay them annually, right? 60,
Yeah.
70, 80,000 a year. 80,000, like good grief, until like I actually sit and break it down and say, well, it's not 80,000. It's whatever that breaks out to a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Now, that's kind of our mentality though. When we hire someone, we hire them on for the long term.
Yeah.
So I think it's good that we think about it that way. But you can't let yourself get frozen in that fear though either, because you'll always be stuck in that rut. If you're always afraid of hiring that next person, and I think you should hire someone that does scare you a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, and here's the question. Here's the correct question, and I think this is a Sean King thing, where you part of the conversation is, wow, so this is a big number. Like can I be completely honest and transparent with you? This number scares me a little. But I think we can do it. I think we can get there. How does bringing you on the team, how can we justify that? Can you help me understand what we're looking at to get you to that number?
Yeah.
And part of that is a mentality shift on like, help me help you sort of thing. Like, how can we get you to this pay? But also we all need to recognize that there needs to be some sort of revenue driver that can afford this position. But yeah, I think you do need to hire people that scare you a little bit. Just
like
it forces you to grow. It really
like
does.
One thing I'm hearing you say is you've mentioned Caleb and Matt and Sean. I know Caleb and Matt. I don't know Sean. I met him at the event, but I haven't had a chance to really get to know him yet. It sounds like you surround yourself with other people who are experiencing similar things. I know some probably are further ahead. Maybe some are similar to where you're at. How big of a role has that played in your development to kind of surround yourself with those like-minded people?
It's massive. I mean, I think that is a massive part of where we are today. Is I get to be around people that have done it already, and that they are in places I aspire to be. Now, whether it's in terms of revenue, whether it's in terms of organizational style, like whatever that is, like these are guys that when they talk, you listen because they've had experiences that you are getting ready to have, right? Or that you might be in the middle of now. It's everything in the world. What is that saying? Like, you are the sum of some average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with or something. I believe that wholeheartedly. I really, really do. And I try to surround myself with people that are in the same situation or that are ahead of me a little bit. And that's part of the conversation I have with them. I mean, that's and I'll be honest with it. Matt Warner is now where I would aspire to be in the future in terms of the companies he's running, how he's running them, the culture that he has infused into his companies. Like, that is where I aspire to be. And that's what I tell him all the time. Like, listen, like, I want to get to where you're at, but this is what's funny though, is then when you talk to Matt, he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I'm trying to grow this thing. I'm trying to, I don't have it figured out. I'm trying to figure it out from so-and-so. You've got to surround yourself with people that are like-minded, that are headed the same direction, and that might be a little bit further ahead so they can kind of show you the way. Mentorship is what we're talking about, right? Is you've got to find mentors that, one, are interested in mentoring, that are interested in helping. But I think more and more, I think that's a common theme. I think there's people out there that would love nothing more than to help the next guy up because they got helped up. Mm-hmm. That they've got the hand up because they followed a guy that was ahead of them, sort of thing. And they introduce you to the next guy too. Like, that's the thing, is when you get into these mentorship groups, and it's not like a formal thing. Like, it's not like the 5 of us sit around in like formal Zoom calls or anything, but we have kind of created our own little mentorship group. And then we introduce each other to the other people that we find that are ahead of us, and we kind of grow that mentorship group too. It's a pretty neat thing. But no, the question being, how important is it? It's everything. It's absolutely everything.
I love that. Well, I appreciate you sharing that.
Of course.
I think that there is a lot of room for the creation of a culture of mentoring.
Yeah.
Uh, businesses, trades, professions used to be completely built around that concept. Masters would train apprentices in all levels of things. And as our culture has moved more and more towards standardized education, higher education, we've lost this touch, but it still has to happen in the real world level. You
We
know,
we lost it in one generation.
yeah,
We absolutely lost that in one generation. So when my granddad was alive, he would talk about, and it was funny is so Caleb and I had this exact conversation where our granddads would go to supply houses and they'd sit around and have coffee with the other fence guys and the other trades guys, and they'd share the tips and tricks that we do now, and they were friendly. And then something changed and something shifted, and our dad's generation became very much dog eat dog. It was very much everyone was against everyone else, and I don't know. And I'm not saying that to say anything about our dads. It was a whole culture shift that I can't understand. I don't know how we got there, but when you talk to guys that were in that era, they all agree. They're like, I don't know what happened because yeah, when it was my dad, they all got along and everyone agreed, and then when I came up through it, is very much me versus you, and I wasn't going to share my secrets with you because they were my secrets.
yeah,
Well, here's the thing: is all of these secrets were really alike. Like everyone felt like they had the thing. They were all holding on to versions of the same thing, right?
hmm
And so what I feel like we're doing in my generation and the subsequent generations is we're kind of bringing back that mentorship level of, through my thing is social media. I love it so much because I can have this conversation with you, and now our conversation can now scale to worldwide, right?
yeah,
Like anyone with an internet connection can likely hear this conversation. So it's it's mentorship on a whole different level, right? Like that's
absolutely.
why I love my YouTube channel is because I get to develop a community not only here in the United States but also we've got a decent following in the UK and in New Zealand and in Brazil of all places where we're fostering this mentorship in ways that we never could before, and that gives me so much hope. Like yeah, it's going to start getting into like a warm fuzzy conversation, but I really feel like we're bringing that back. I really
Yeah, it's
do.
important.
It
It's
is.
it's critical. It's like you said, it was those relationships and that mentality that's been everything for you, and I think it is our job to recreate it and to create that culture back. A guy asked to be on the podcast. That's probably more like our dad's generation. He said, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to give away my secrets." He said, "I'm just going to invite a competitor to come in and copy me. Please don't reach out to me anymore." And it's
Yeah.
okay. It doesn't hurt my feelings. I kind
That's
of
his
feel
reality.
that's his reality, and he's terrified if he gets in some interview situation, that he's going to share something that's going to take away from him. And on the flip side of that, Bergflow, the company I work with, has helped build a community in the home inspection world, right? It's a training and mastermind type community, right? There's several hundred members, but at the very top level, there's 17 companies that really lead the way. That are kind of like the tip of the spear.
Hmm.
And all these companies are above 5 million, so 5 to 15 to 20 million. And I'm sharing all this because I really want to point. There's a point here that is just it blows my mind when I to share this. Of those companies, 17 companies, 5 of them are in Houston, and they get on the phone with each other and share best practices.
Yeah.
They're
Because
in the
together we get
same
better.
market, running large home inspection companies in the same
Yeah.
market, and they are the fastest growing companies in the country. And yet they manage to not be just competitors. They manage to be friends. So there is so much to be said for that change in mentality.
Yeah. Tell me those two things aren't related. that they all share best practices with each other on a regular basis, and that they are the most successful companies in their industry, in their markets. Those two things are absolutely related. Because here's the other thing. I've got a son and he's 4. So, like every dad, my dream is that he one day steps up into the fence company. So, as parents, we want the best possible outcome for our kids. I think we can agree on that. So, why wouldn't I help create an industry that is better and a community that's better for him to step up into? Right? Like what better thing? I'm not going to be here forever. So what if we help build a community that is dead set on making sure everybody wins, so that when he comes up through the ranks and he's involved in the company and maybe I'm not around anymore, I know he has a whole community around him that's obsessed with making sure everybody wins. Please explain to me the downside of that.
Yeah.
There isn't one. There
No.
isn't one.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Like if I teach someone how to do, in my market, how to do social media marketing, and they just excel at it and they smoke us, that's my fault for not innovating. That's my fault for not growing.
Yeah.
Right? I let that happen. I encourage it. I mean, competition makes everyone better. It really does. I try to work with contractors in my area because I'm in our little market in Southwest Missouri. We are the only ones doing social media in such a dedicated way. Quite literally the only ones doing live Facebook video. No one else is. So we kind of just get to do what we want to do. Yeah. But if we were to have some competition in that, we would probably be forced to grow and innovate, right? We would be forced to be better. I think we would be better if we did have some competition. But to that gentleman's point, like that is the reality that he grew up in, though. That if you did share your secret, someone else could take it and they could use it against you. But here's the comparison. Why didn't Hilton or some other big hotel brand create Airbnb? Why didn't a taxi company create Lyft or whatever car ride sharing service?
Yeah.
Why didn't they? Like they had the keys to that. They had that. They didn't make it, so somebody else did. They didn't innovate, so they got left behind for a while. But now you hear about hotel companies that are getting involved with the Airbnb type experience. So we had a big convention down in New Orleans a month and a half ago, and I stayed at this place called the Crescent, which is right across the street from the convention center. It was on Airbnb, and it was some converted apartments is essentially what it was. But you check in with someone at the front desk. They have a type of maid service. They have amenities, and I'm looking around like this is a hotel. Like I am absolutely staying in a hotel right now, but it's also Airbnb. Like hotel companies are starting to figure this out, where they can have hybrid services. But anyway, to that gentleman's point, like I understand that's his reality, but if he loses because he shares a secret, I don't. Is he winning by not sharing the secret? I don't think so. I mean,
I don't either.
It's together we get better. My thing is a rising tide raises all the ships.
Yeah.
If we make our industries better, then we benefit from it absolutely.
I had a guy on here who runs a chimney business here locally, an old friend. And, it's interesting. I've seen his life change. My life was way different back when we used to hang out when we were young. And he said, it's funny. I've learned that in business to win, I just have to remember all those sayings on the pictures on the wall that we saw from kindergarten. He's like, just make those true in your business.
It's so true.
And
it's so true.
Because he told me on the phone, he's like, yeah, I'm just doing the stuff I learned in kindergarten. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out what the heck he meant. But when we chatted, he shared, he said, that stuff, it turned out it was actually true.
Going to find out they were onto something.
Yeah. So
what's funny? in my daughter's so my daughter's in middle school now, and that doesn't seem right. But when she was in elementary school, they're teaching the Rockefeller habits in elementary school and applying them to learning. Start with the end in mind. Always sharpen the saw or sharpen the axe. They're teaching the Rockefeller habits in school, and I am so excited about that.
That's awesome. She must be going to a good school if they're teaching that. That's
Public
awesome.
education.
Really? Wow.
It's a public school. Now, and it is a good school district and all that. Like, I don't want to downplay that, but I cannot tell you how jacked I was when she came home. She's like, "Dad, I earned an award for starting with the end in mind." What'd you say? Yeah, it's an award. We have to do these things in school, and when we do, when a teacher sees us do these things, we get an award, and there's sharpen the saw, and it's no kidding. And so I had reached out to I knew my daughter's teacher at the time, and so I reached out. I was like, "Hey, are you teaching the Rockefeller habits in school?" And she's like, "Yes," and it's awesome. Like, it's part of the curriculum now to where because it applies to everything. It really does. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are entire businesses revolving around teaching other businesses these Rockefeller habits, right, for a reason. So, but no, but it's funny you say that about we're doing the things we learned in kindergarten. Like, the things they're learning in elementary school now, like, I am completely excited to see what happens, 20 years from now when kids this age are in the professional world, like, are out in their careers. I think we're going to see a blossoming of business. I really do. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, but
I love it. I love to think about there being a bright spot in that future. That's a perspective that needs to be spoken into reality more often.
Agreed.
So, man, this was awesome, Joe. I really, really enjoyed it. I know you do a lot on social media. We didn't even jump into that, but where can everybody find you on social and all?
Just search Joe Everest. So my primary channel is YouTube, which is youtube.com/Joe Everest, JoeEverest. Also on Facebook as facebook.com/The Real Joe Everest, because apparently there are several on Facebook, but only one of them is me.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you search Joe Everest, I'm also LinkedIn. What's that?
The man in orange.
Yeah. Listen, if there's orange in that profile picture, there's a good chance it's me. But yeah, no, LinkedIn, I'm there. Twitter a little bit. I mean, YouTube is pretty much the channel to find me on.
Awesome. So any closing thoughts? Anything that I know there's a ton of things we could have covered.
So many. No, we'll have to do a part 2. I've really, really enjoyed this. No, I mean, here's the thing is I commend you for having these conversations, because I don't feel like they're happening enough. But I think if we do make these type of conversations mainstream where everyone is having them, then our country as a whole gets better. Our trades industries as a whole get better. And I commend you because I understand absolutely how much time, effort, money goes into these sort of things.
Yeah.
So I commend you for doing this and for just fostering this type of conversation.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. I enjoy them. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a beneficiary to being in the room and being a part of the conversation. It's a privilege to do it, and it's a privilege to share it. And and then I think the burden comes back on my shoulders to distribute this in a way that puts it in front of the people who can get the most benefit out of it. And so that's what we're doing. It's it's awesome, and I get to talk with guys like you that are doing cool things. I love when I have the conversation. I feel like we're in alignment, and I feel like that happens a lot. I'm like, man, they're thinking the same things I'm thinking. They're going for a similar vision, and it charges me up like you wouldn't believe. So thanks again. But that's it for this episode of Technician to CEO. We'll see everybody next time.